Lieutenant Jason Carter had survived many hostile environments, but nothing compared to the ruthless wilderness of Varcos 7. The planet was alive in ways he had never experienced before. Every tree, every shadow, every whispering breeze seemed to conceal some lurking predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. The air was thick with moisture, carrying the sharp, musky scent of alien flora and the metallic tang of something far more sinister. His crash landing had left him bruised, battered, and alone, stranded in a jungle that did not tolerate weakness. His emergency supplies had been destroyed in the wreckage, leaving him with only his wits, his knife, and whatever he could scavenge from the unforgiving terrain. The first night had been the worst. Darkness on Varcos 7 was absolute. The twin suns dipped below the jagged mountain range, plunging the jungle into a void so black it swallowed even the faintest outline of his hands. Then came the sounds, the rustling of enormous bodies moving through the undergrowth, the screeches of unseen creatures, and the deep, guttural growls of something large circling his position. Carter had wedged himself between the roots of a towering tree, knife clutched so tightly his knuckles ached. Sleep was out of the question. He listened, heart pounding, as something massive stalked the wreckage site where he had made his temporary camp. He knew he couldn't stay in one place. This was their territory. He was an intruder. By morning, the jungle revealed its true nature. The ground was littered with bones, not small ones. Massive, cracked femurs, jagged skulls with deep claw marks, ribs shattered like brittle twigs. Whatever had been hunting around his camp last night had done this before. It was a predator at the top of the food chain, something not only accustomed to killing but thriving on it. The realization hit him hard. If he didn't adapt, he would become just another carcass. Hunger gnawed at him. His body craved sustenance, but the only life around him was alien, untested, and potentially lethal. Every leaf glistened with unknown toxins, every berry dripped with suspiciously iridescent juices. Even the water, pooled in deep, stagnant basins between massive roots, had an unnatural shimmer that made his instincts scream, "Don't drink that." Carter had to find real food, something his body could break down without turning against him. It was during his desperate search for food that he first saw the Zarkun. It moved like a shadow, slipping between the trees with unnatural grace, despite its massive frame. 8 legs carried its sleek, armored body over the uneven jungle floor, its black scales reflecting only the faintest traces of light. The thing was designed to hunt. 6 smoldering red eyes burned through the undergrowth, scanning for weakness. And then it stopped. It knew. Carter didn't breathe. His heart slammed against his ribs as he pressed his body against the tree trunk, willing himself to become the jungle. But the Zarkun had already decided. With a terrifying stillness, it turned its head toward him, a slow, deliberate motion that sent an icy spike of fear through his core. Then it charged. Carter barely had time to react. The Zarkun moved fast, too fast. He threw himself to the side as it lunged, its massive talons carving deep gouges into the bark where he had stood a heartbeat earlier. Rolling to his feet, he reached for his sidearm only to remember it had been lost in the crash. Only the knife remained. The Zarkun didn't hesitate. It came again, closing the distance in an instant. Carter ducked beneath a sweeping claw, his instincts taking over. He ran. Branches tore at his skin as he sprinted through the jungle, the sound of thundering footsteps right behind him. It wasn't just chasing him, it was hurting him, pushing him towards something. His foot caught on a hidden root, and he crashed to the ground, rolling onto his back just in time to see the Zarkun pounce. There was no choice. He struck. The blade found its mark, plunging deep into the soft flesh beneath the creature's jaw. A horrific screech split the air as the Zarkun thrashed, its momentum sending them both crashing to the ground. Carter wrenched the knife upward, driving the blade deeper. The beast spasmed, its 6 eyes dimming, its breath rattling in its throat. Then it was still. Carter lay there for a moment, panting, his hands trembling from the adrenaline surge. His entire body ached, his vision blurred at the edges, but he was alive. The jungle was silent. Watching. Survival wasn't enough anymore. He had to dominate. With grim determination, he set to work. He carved into the beast's flesh, stripping muscle from bone with practiced efficiency. Blood slicked his fingers as he built a fire, the scent of charred meat rising into the humid air. The Zarkun was dead, and Carter was still standing. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't have known, was that he had broken an ancient law. Because deep within the jungle, hidden beneath the tangled canopy, something else was watching. And it was angry. The scent of seared meat drifted through the thick jungle air, mingling with the ever-present dampness of the alien world. Lieutenant Jason Carter sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting long shadows across the clearing. His hands, still slick with the blood of the Zarkun, trembled slightly as he tore into the roasted flesh. Hunger had stripped away hesitation. He had no idea what consuming the apex predator of this planet would do to his body, but at this moment, survival outweighed uncertainty. He bit down, the rich, smoky taste flooding his senses. It was unlike anything he had ever eaten, dense, slightly metallic, but strangely satisfying. His body, desperate for sustenance, accepted it without protest. Across the clearing, something moved. Carter tensed, his muscles coiling in instinctive readiness. The jungle was never truly silent, but this was different. A presence. A watcher. Slowly, he turned his head and froze. She stood just beyond the firelight, her silhouette illuminated by the dying embers. Tall and impossibly elegant, her figure was framed by the alien flora, as though she had emerged from the very heart of the jungle itself. Her skin, a deep, iridescent blue, shimmered in the dim glow, and her eyes golden, piercing, filled with something that sent a chill down Carter's spine, locked onto him with an intensity he could feel in his bones. Naira. The name surfaced in his mind as if whispered by the jungle itself. He had seen figures like her before, in the blurry, classified reports of reconnaissance teams that had never returned. The native warriors of Varco 7, an elusive and deadly race known to outsiders only as the Sirene. To see one was rare. To be caught in their gaze unheard of. And yet, here she was, her expression a storm of emotions he couldn't yet decipher. Shock. Disgust. Curiosity. Then, her gaze shifted downward, and Carter followed it, his stomach twisting as he realized what she was looking at: the remnants of his meal. The Zarkun's remains lay scattered around the fire, its hide stripped, its bones already blackened by the heat. Her eyes snapped back to his, and this time, he understood. Horror. Carter slowly rose to his feet, hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm, but Naira didn't move. She stood motionless, her breathing shallow and controlled, her entire body taut with restrained energy. He could almost hear the unspoken words passing through her mind, the disbelief thick in the air between them. This human had done the impossible. He had slain a Zarkun. And not only had he killed it, he had eaten it. He took a cautious step forward, but the moment his boot shifted against the damp earth, she moved. Not backward. Not away. Forward. In an instant, a weapon appeared in her grasp, a curved blade, its edge glinting in the dim firelight. Carter barely had time to process the motion before it was at his throat. She was fast. Faster than anything he had ever seen. His instincts screamed at him to fight, but he forced himself to remain still, his pulse hammering against the cool metal of her blade. "You do not understand what you have done," she whispered, her voice smooth yet edged with something dangerous. "The Zarkun are not prey. They are the gods of this land. To kill one is sacrilege. To consume one." Her voice faltered, as if the very thought was too repulsive to put into words. Carter swallowed hard, his mind racing. "I had no choice," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion and adrenaline. "I would have died." She studied him, her golden eyes flickering with something unreadable. Then, slowly, she withdrew the blade, though her stance remained guarded. "You do not belong here," she said, as if stating a universal truth. "And yet, you have done what no outsider ever has." The weight of her words settled over him. He had broken something, an ancient, unspoken rule of this planet. He wasn't just another lost soldier anymore. He was an anomaly. A trespasser who had stepped beyond the boundaries of what should have been possible. Naira sheathed her blade and took a slow step back. "The jungle will not forget this," she murmured. "Nor will my people." Carter exhaled, realizing for the first time how close he had come to death, not at the hands of the Zarkun, but at hers. "What happens now?" he asked cautiously. Naira regarded him for a long moment before turning her gaze toward the darkened treetops. "Now," she said, almost to herself. "Now, we see if the gods take vengeance." And just as she spoke, the jungle shifted. A low, guttural rumble echoed through the night. The trees trembled, their thick roots twisting beneath the ground as if something far greater than the Zarkun was stirring. The fire flickered wildly, casting frantic shadows against the walls of the clearing. Carter's grip tightened around his knife. Naira's expression darkened. "You were never supposed to survive this planet," she murmured. "And now, the planet knows it?" The realization struck Carter with the force of a thunderclap. He hadn't just eaten the apex predator. He had challenged the balance of an entire world. The silence between them stretched, thick with the weight of an unspoken chasm. Carter could feel it pressing in on him as Naira regarded him with those piercing golden eyes. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about a human lost on an alien world. It was about something far greater, the collision of two civilizations, two entirely different ways of understanding the universe. And Carter, whether he wanted to be or not, had become the embodiment of that collision. Naira's gaze flickered to the remains of the Zarkun, and her expression twisted with something that could have been anger, sorrow, or disgust, maybe all three. Carter had seen many emotions in his time as a soldier, but the way she looked at him now was unlike anything he had ever encountered. To her, he wasn't just a foreigner. He was something unnatural. Something wrong. "You do not understand what you have done," she said, and there was something in her voice, a restrained fury, a quiet disbelief that sent a chill through him. "You stand in a world that does not belong to you. You consume what was never meant to be consumed. Do you even know what the Zarkun are?" Carter clenched his jaw, unsure of how to answer. He knew they were the apex predators of this planet. He knew they were lethal, relentless hunters. But there was something in the way she spoke that told him this was about more than just biology. "They were food," he said simply, his voice rough from exhaustion. Naira flinched, as if he had struck her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "They were gods." Carter exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He was too tired for riddles. Look, I don't know how things work on your world, but where I come from, we don't worship things that want to tear us apart limb by limb. We fight them. We kill them. If we have to, we eat them. Naira's expression hardened. And that is why your kind will never understand. You believe the universe is something to be conquered, something to be claimed. You see only enemies or prey. But we she gestured around them, as if motioning to the jungle itself. We are part of this world. The Zarkyun are not monsters to us. They are balance. They are the test by which we prove ourselves. To face one is an honor. To defeat one. She trailed off, her gaze darkening. Carter narrowed his eyes. Then why am I still alive? Naira's lips pressed into a thin line. She took a slow, measured breath before speaking. Because you have done something that no outsider ever has. You have shattered the order of things. Carter let her words sink in. He wasn't just a survivor. He was an anomaly. He had broken a rule so ancient, so deeply ingrained in this world's culture, that the very idea of it seemed impossible. And Naira, she wasn't just a warrior confronting an outsider. She was someone staring at a reality that should not exist. He took a cautious step forward. Then what do we do now? Naira's jaw tightened. We, she echoed, as if testing the word on her tongue. Yeah, Carter said. Because from where I'm standing, neither of us is exactly in a good position. You said it yourself, the jungle won't forget this. If I've broken something, then you're standing here with me. That means you're a part of it too. For the first time, hesitation flickered across her face. Carter saw the conflict in her, the war between duty and something else, something she couldn't yet name. He could see it in the way she held herself, in the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. This is not my choice, she said finally. You have forced a path to open where none should have existed. Now, we walk it, whether I wish to or not. Carter gave a small, humorless chuckle. Sounds like war. Naira's eyes met his, and there was no amusement in them. Perhaps, she murmured. Or perhaps it is something even worse. They stood there, staring at each other across the dying embers of the fire, two people from different worlds bound by a single, irreversible act. Carter had survived. But survival had come at a cost. And neither of them had yet to understand what that cost truly was. The jungle was never silent. Even in the dead of night, the air thrummed with the hum of unseen creatures, the distant calls of predators, and the rustling of life moving through the dense undergrowth. Carter had learned to listen, to recognize the sounds that meant danger and the ones that meant he could breathe at least for a moment. But as he sat near the dying embers of the fire, the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Something had changed. The air felt different, charged with a tension that set his instincts on edge. Across from him, Naira sat in rigid silence, her golden eyes reflecting the last flickers of flame. She had barely spoken since their last argument, since she had told him that by killing and eating the Zarkyun, he had broken something sacred. Carter didn't know what to do with that. He had fought to survive, wasn't he that all that mattered? But the way she looked at him now, as if he had shattered the very foundation of her world, made him question everything. Then, the jungle went still. Not quiet still. Carter held his breath. Even the ever-present hum of insects had vanished. It was as if the world had inhaled and refused to exhale. His fingers tightened around the crude spear he had fashioned, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. Whatever was out there, it wasn't something he could fight off with sharpened wood. Naira's posture changed in an instant. She had already been tense, but now she moved with a predator's grace, her hand reaching for the curved blade at her hip. Her ears twitched, straining to pick up what even Carter's heightened senses couldn't detect. Then, just as suddenly as the silence had fallen, the attack came. It wasn't the Zarkun. It wasn't any creature Carter had encountered in the hellscape of this alien jungle. The air ripped apart with an ear-splitting shriek, and something massive crashed through the trees, moving with impossible speed. Carter barely had time to roll as something struck the ground where he had been sitting a second before, sending shards of stone and dirt flying in all directions. His heart pounded as he scrambled to his feet, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The creature was unlike anything he had encountered before. Its body was sleek and segmented, covered in an iridescent exoskeleton that shimmered under the dim light. It moved like a serpent but had too many legs, far too many. And its eyes, hundreds of them, glowed with a cold, calculating intelligence. Vialthera, Naira hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter didn't know what that meant, but the raw fear in her tone sent ice through his veins. The creature lunged. Carter barely had time to react before Naira was there, moving with a speed and precision that seemed almost impossible. Her blade flashed in the dim light, slicing through the air with lethal grace. But the creature was fast, too fast. It twisted, its segmented body undulating like liquid, dodging her strike with unnatural ease. Then it turned its attention to Carter. He didn't think, he moved. His body acted on instinct, muscles honed by years of combat kicking into motion. He dove to the side as the creature's massive pincers snapped shut inches from his arm, the force of the strike shattering the ground beneath it. He rolled, grabbing a jagged rock from the dirt, and hurled it at one of the many glowing eyes. It struck true, and the creature let out a piercing screech, momentarily recoiling. But it wasn't enough. Carter had fought against impossible odds before. He had stared death in the face on more than one occasion. But this was different. This thing wasn't just a predator. It wasn't hunting them for food. It was hunting them for something far worse. Naira's blade found its mark, slicing through one of the creature's many legs. A thick, black ichor sprayed from the wound, sizzling as it hit the ground. The creature shrieked again, its massive body coiling in on itself. Carter could feel the vibrations through the ground, a deep, unnatural resonance that made his skull throb. Then, without warning, it vanished. Not retreated. Vanished. One moment it was there, towering over them, and the next, it was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the jungle as if it had never been there at all. For several heartbeats, neither of them moved. The only sound was their ragged breathing. Carter could still feel the aftershocks of its presence, the static charge it had left in the air. He turned to Naira, his mind racing. What the hell was that? Naira didn't answer immediately. She was still gripping her blade so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale, her golden eyes locked on the spot where the creature had disappeared. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost reverent. A guardian. Carter frowned. A guardian of what? Naira's gaze flickered to him, something unreadable in her expression. Not what, she said. Who? The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy fog. This was no random attack. The Zarkun had been the apex predators of this world, but this was something else entirely. Something ancient. Something watching. Carter exhaled slowly, his pulse still racing. You're telling me this thing was sent? That it was waiting for us? Naira hesitated. Then, Reluctantly, she nodded. By whom? Carter pressed. Her lips parted, but before she could answer, a new sound echoed through the jungle, a distant, rhythmic thrum. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the whisper of the wind or the rustling of leaves. It was mechanical. And it was getting closer. Carter exchanged a look with Naira, and in that moment, they both knew this was just the beginning. The jungle never truly slept. Even in the dead of night, it pulsed with unseen life, hunters and hunted, stalkers and the stalked. Carter had learned that quickly. Every step was a gamble, every movement a potential mistake. But tonight, as he and Naira moved through the dense undergrowth, something was different. The predator was no longer just watching. It was hunting. He could feel it now, the weight of an unseen gaze pressing down on them like an unspoken threat. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. A primal instinct buried deep in his bones, screaming at him to move, to fight, to survive. His grip tightened around the makeshift blade he had fashioned from the remains of the Zarkun. It was crude, but it was sharp, and right now, it was all he had. Beside him, Naira was deathly still. Her golden eyes flickered in the dim moonlight filtering through the canopy, scanning the shadows with the precision of a seasoned warrior. He didn't have to ask if she felt it too. He could see it in the way her muscles tensed, the way her hand hovered over the hilt of her blade, the way her breath came slower, measured. Then, the world shifted. A whisper of movement, a branch barely bending, a leaf shifting in the windless air. It was the only warning they got. The attack came like lightning, a blur of movement and raw power. Carter barely had time to throw himself to the side before the ground where he'd been standing exploded in a shower of dirt and shattered roots. The creature was faster than anything he had faced before. A streak of shimmering black, its exoskeleton blending into the darkness like liquid shadow. Its eyes, too many of them, gleamed with an intelligence that sent a chill through him. This wasn't just an animal. It was a calculated killer. Naira was already moving, her blade flashing in the dim light as she lunged forward with practiced grace. But the creature twisted unnaturally, dodging her strike with an eerie, fluid motion. It let out a guttural, clicking sound that vibrated in Carter's chest, as if it was mocking them. Carter didn't wait. He surged forward, swinging his blade in a brutal arc. He wasn't a master of finesse like Naira, but he knew how to fight, how to kill. The blade met resistance, slicing deep into the creature's side. A thick, black ichor spilled from the wound, hissing as it hit the ground. The thing let out a shriek that sent birds scattering from the treetops. But it didn't fall. Instead, it laughed. Not a sound Carter had ever heard before, not human, not anything that should exist in this world. A wet, gurgling amusement that made his skin crawl. And then, it spoke. "You think you are the hunter?" The voice was layered, distorted, as if coming from somewhere else. Carter barely had time to process the words before it struck. He felt the impact before he saw the movement, a force like a battering ram slamming into his chest. He flew backward, crashing into the underbrush with enough force to knock the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he forced himself up, coughing, gripping his blade. Naira had already re-engaged, moving with a speed that even the creature struggled to match. She was relentless, her strikes precise, each movement a lesson in controlled aggression. But the thing was playing with her. Carter saw it now, the way it dodged just enough to make her overextend, the way it lured her into attacking harder, faster, until her breathing became ragged. It was testing her. Toying with her. And then it did something Carter hadn't expected. It turned its back on her. It ignored the trained warrior, the seasoned fighter, and instead locked its glowing, predatory eyes on him. "You," it rasped, stepping closer, its voice dripping with something Carter couldn't quite name. "You are the anomaly. You are the problem." Carter forced himself to his feet, gripping his weapon tighter. "Yeah? Get in line." The creature tilted its head, almost curious. "You should not have survived." Carter smirked, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I get that a lot." The thing lunged, but this time, Carter was ready. He ducked low, twisting at the last second. He wasn't faster than it, but he didn't have to be. He just had to be smarter. He drove his blade upward, straight into the wound he had already made. The reaction was instant. The creature let out a screech that shattered the night, its body convulsing as the blade tore deeper. Black ichor poured from the wound, coating Carter's hands, burning his skin like acid. But he didn't let go. He twisted the blade, driving it in further, until he felt the resistance snap. The thing staggered back, its many eyes flickering wildly. It tried to move, but its legs faltered. It was weakening. Naira didn't hesitate. She moved in like a storm, her blade flashing once, twice, a final, decisive strike. The creature collapsed, its body spasming violently before finally going still. Silence. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The jungle had fallen quiet again, as if even the predators of this world recognized what had just happened. Then, finally, Naira exhaled. She turned to Carter, her expression unreadable. That was not an ordinary predator. Carter wiped the burning ichor from his arm, wincing. No kidding. She studied the creature's lifeless form, her golden eyes dark with something he couldn't quite place. "This was sent for you." Carter frowned. "What are you talking about?" Naira hesitated. Then, she said the words that made his blood run cold. "This was not the hunter." Carter's stomach dropped. "Then what was it?" Naira met his gaze, her expression grim. "The warning." The night air was thick with the scent of blood and burning ichor. Carter's hands were shaking, his breath ragged as he stared down at the creature's lifeless body. It should have been over. The predator was dead. But the words Naira had spoken moments ago refused to leave his mind. This was not the hunter. This was the warning. A cold chill settled over him, deeper than the exhaustion in his muscles or the sting of his wounds. If this thing, this nightmare that had nearly torn them apart, was just a messenger, then what was coming next? Naira was already moving, her golden eyes scanning the jungle with a sharp intensity. "We need to leave. Now." Carter forced his body into motion, following her through the dense undergrowth. Every instinct screamed that they were running out of time. If this thing was a warning, then whoever or whatever had sent it knew where they were. And they would be sending something worse. The terrain was unforgiving. Jagged roots clawed at their boots, the thick canopy above swallowing what little moonlight remained. They moved in silence, both knowing that sound could mean death. Then Carter felt a shift in the air. It wasn't just paranoia. The jungle listened. He could feel it in the unnatural stillness, in the way even the nocturnal creatures had gone silent. It was the same feeling he'd had before the last attack. But now, it was stronger. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. He tightened his grip on his blade, his fingers slick with sweat. "Naira," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They're already here." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her free hand hovered just above the hilt of her weapon. Then, a sound, a low, guttural growl that sent ice through Carter's veins. It wasn't like before. This wasn't one creature. It was many. Shapes moved in the darkness, shifting between the trees like wraiths. Carter barely had time to register the glowing eyes before they were surrounded. The creatures emerged, their forms sleek and deadly, exoskeletons gleaming under the dim light. They weren't like the first one. They were smaller, faster, their movements too coordinated to be mindless beasts. A pack. Naira whispered something in her own language, a curse or a prayer he couldn't tell. Then she turned to him, her voice steady despite the odds stacked against them. "We don't fight. Not here. Not now." Carter exhaled sharply. "Then what do we do?" She met his gaze, her expression grim. "We run." There was no time to think. No time to hesitate. The first creature lunged, and they moved. Carter's legs burned as he pushed himself forward, weaving through the dense jungle, his heart hammering against his ribs. The creatures followed silent, relentless, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like twin flames. The chase was a blur of motion. Carter could hear them gaining, the sharp snap of branches, the rustle of leaves as the pack closed in. He didn't dare look back. He couldn't. Then Naira veered sharply to the left, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist, pulling him with her. Carter nearly stumbled but followed, trusting her instincts. And then he saw it. A cliff. The ground ended just feet ahead, a sheer drop plunging into the abyss below. Carter skidded to a halt, chest heaving. "You've got to be kidding me." The creatures slowed, their glowing eyes reflecting an eerie hunger. They knew they had won. They spread out, forming a half circle, cutting off any escape. Carter turned to Naira, searching for a plan. "Tell me you've got something." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze flickered toward the cliff's edge, then back at him. And that's when he understood. "You are kidding me." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "It's the only way." Carter looked over the edge. The drop was impossible to measure in the darkness. The wind howled through the ravine below, an endless void waiting to swallow them whole. "We don't even know what's down there." "We know what's up here," she shot back. The creatures inched closer. They were done waiting. Carter clenched his jaw, his mind racing. It was suicide. But staying was worse. He looked at Naira. She wasn't afraid. Maybe that was why he trusted her. Maybe that was why, when she took his hand, he didn't hesitate. Together, they ran. The creatures surged forward. And then they jumped. The fall was instant, gravity ripping them down, the wind tearing at their skin. Carter barely had time to think before the world plunged into darkness. The air roared past them, a deafening rush of wind as Carter and Naira plummeted into the abyss. The world above vanished in an instant, swallowed by the darkness stretching endlessly below. There was no time to think, no time to react, only the sheer force of gravity pulling them toward an uncertain fate. Carter barely managed to twist his body mid-air, reaching for Naira as they fell. Their hands met for the briefest moment before the wind tore them apart again. His stomach lurched as the blackness thickened around them, the bottom nowhere in sight. Then, without warning, his body struck something, a sharp, jarring impact that sent pain shooting through his limbs. The next moment, he was sliding, tumbling, grasping for anything to slow his descent. His fingers finally caught something, a thick, gnarled root protruding from the rock face. The sudden stop wrenched his shoulder painfully, but he held on, his breath ragged. His heart pounded as he looked down. The cavernous ravine stretched far below, its depths lost in shadows. Then, a movement, a shape above him. Naira. She was falling fast, her form twisting in midair as she fought for control. Carter's grip tightened. Without thinking, he braced himself and reached out. "Naira," he shouted, the wind snatching his voice away. For a split second, he thought he had missed. But then, her fingers caught his wrist, and he clenched his hold on her with every ounce of strength he had left. The force of her fall nearly tore him from his precarious grip, his muscles screaming in protest. He gritted his teeth and pulled, drawing her up just enough for her to latch onto the same root. For a moment, they just hung there, their breaths coming in shallow gasps, the weight of survival pressing down on them. She met his gaze, golden eyes fierce even in the dimness. "We need to move." He nodded, swallowing the pain in his shoulder as they began their slow climb down. The surface was rough and uneven, jagged stone and twisted roots their only lifeline. Their fingers bled, their limbs trembled, but they had no choice. Below them, the faint glimmer of bioluminescent fungi revealed the cavern's floor, uneven and scattered with remnants of bones. They dropped the last few feet, landing hard. Carter rolled to absorb the impact, wincing at the jolt through his body. His hands pressed into damp soil, and he forced himself upright. Naira was already scanning their surroundings, every muscle in her body coiled, ready for another fight. But it wasn't silence that greeted them. It was a growl. A deep, guttural sound that rumbled through the cavern walls. Carter's blood ran cold as his eyes adjusted. Across the cavern, half shrouded in the darkness, something moved. It was massive. The air shifted with its presence, the sheer weight of its existence pressing against them like a force of nature. Glowing eyes, larger than any they had seen before, burned through the dark. The Alpha. Carter's grip tightened around his blade. This was the true ruler of the jungle, the nightmare behind the hunt. The others had been deadly, but this was something else. A creature born from evolution's most ruthless design, the perfect predator, the apex in every sense of the word. And it was looking right at them. A shudder rippled through the beast's hulking form as it stepped forward, its claws sinking into the earth with lethal precision. Its maw opened slightly, revealing jagged teeth dripping with a thick, viscous substance that sizzled where it touched the ground. "Any plans?" Carter asked, forcing himself to stay still despite the primal urge to run. Naira's voice was low, measured. "One. But you're not going to like it?" She didn't wait for a response. In a blur of motion, she reached into her belt and pulled free a small, metallic device, a charge. The last of their explosives. She twisted the timer, setting it for a dangerously short delay, then locked eyes with Carter. "Run," she said. And then she threw it. The device arced through the air, landing just beneath the Alpha's belly. The creature reacted instantly. A sound more than a roar, something primal and earth-shattering erupted from its throat. It lunged. Carter didn't need to be told twice. He ran. Naira was beside him, their feet pounding against the cavern floor as the air behind them exploded in heat and pressure. The force threw them forward, sending them crashing into the ground as dust and debris rained around them. The world was chaos. A deafening silence followed, then the groan of rock shifting, collapsing. Carter coughed, pushing himself upright. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but he saw it. The Alpha lay motionless, its body half crushed beneath fallen stone. The impact had torn through its hide, exposing muscle and bone. Its massive chest still rose and fell, but each breath was weaker than the last. Naira approached, slow and deliberate. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She drew her blade and, with a swift, final motion, ended it. Silence fell over the cavern once more. Carter exhaled, sinking to the ground. His body ached, his mind reeled, but against all odds, against every force that had tried to kill them, they had survived. He looked at Naira. She stood over the fallen beast, breathing hard, her expression unreadable. But in her golden eyes, he saw something new. Respect. Understanding. And maybe, just maybe, something more. The silence that followed was unlike any Carter had ever experienced. It was not the quiet of the jungle, alive with the murmurs of unseen creatures. It was the hush of something absolute. The weight of finality pressed down on him as he looked at the fallen Alpha, its massive body still beneath the rubble. The once fearsome beast, the ruler of this unforgiving land, was now nothing more than a still carcass, its golden eyes dimming into lifelessness. His breath was ragged, his muscles screamed in protest, but the realization crept in: they had won. Against impossible odds, against a predator that had haunted this planet for generations, they had survived. He turned to Naira, who stood beside the corpse, her chest rising and falling in steady breaths. She was motionless, her gaze locked on the creature, but Carter could tell this was not mere exhaustion. This was something deeper. This was more than just a hunt for you, wasn't it? His voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Naira didn't answer right away. Instead, she crouched beside the Alpha, running her fingers across its thick hide. There was no triumph in her expression, no celebration. Only a quiet reverence. "This beast was a god to my people," she finally said. "Legends spoke of it as an untouchable force. Warriors died trying to challenge it, hoping to prove themselves worthy." She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. "And yet, here it lies, felled not by a great warrior, not by the god's will, but by strategy, by desperation, by you." Carter frowned. "I didn't kill it alone. We both did this." "You changed the rules," she said, her golden eyes unreadable. "No siren has ever fought like you. We rely on instinct, on tradition. You adapt. You break the cycle." Carter let that sink in. He hadn't thought about it that way. To him, survival meant improvisation, thinking outside of the rigid structures of combat. To Naira's people, combat was a ritual, a test of strength and honor. He had done something they had never considered. And now, the greatest predator of their world lay at their feet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The enormity of what they had done loomed over them like the cavern walls, unshakable and absolute. Then, a distant rumble. A shifting of stone. Carter's instincts flared. "That blast, do you think it dash?" "The structure is unstable," Naira finished for him. She stood swiftly, her sharp gaze scanning the cavern. "We need to move. Now." Carter didn't argue. His body protested every movement, but survival didn't care for pain. He fell in step behind Naira as they moved through the cavern, their path uncertain but urgent. They climbed, scrambling over jagged rocks, feeling the tremors beneath their feet. The cavern was not going to hold much longer. More than once, Carter had to brace himself as loose debris crashed down around them. Each moment felt stretched, pulled tight with tension. After what felt like an eternity, light natural, warm, real pierced through the darkness. They had reached an opening, a way out. Naira climbed first, her powerful form moving with a grace Carter could only envy. He followed, dragging himself onto the surface just as a final collapse echoed behind them, sealing the cavern shut forever. They lay there for a moment, side by side on the cool jungle floor, staring at the foreign sky above them. The air was heavy with moisture, thick with the sense of the world they had battled to survive. It was over. Carter sat up first, looking down at himself. His armor was torn, his skin marred with cuts and bruises. He had never felt so alive. Naira sat up beside him, her gaze still distant. "They won't believe us," she murmured. "My people." Carter chuckled, though it hurt to do so. "Yeah, well, that makes two of us. Try explaining to my superiors that I took down a legendary beast with a Sirene warrior princess at my side." A ghost of a smile flickered across her face, but it faded as quickly as it came. "This changes everything." He knew what she meant. The death of the Alpha was more than a victory, it was a shift in the balance of power, in the way her people would view the world. The impossible had been made possible. The untouchable, touched. Carter glanced at her, studying her expression. "So, what happens now?" Naira hesitated, as if the weight of the question was too much to carry. "I don't know," she admitted. "My people, they might see this as a betrayal of tradition. Or a new beginning. And you?" She turned to him, searching his face. "I know that I cannot go back unchanged. I cannot unsee what I have seen, unlearn what I have learned. And I know that this fight, our fight, it is not over." Carter nodded slowly. "Then maybe we take this one step at a time. Together." Her gaze softened just a fraction. Together. The jungle stretched before them, vast and unknowable. The world they had once feared now lay open, waiting for whatever came next. And for the first time in his life, Carter wasn't just surviving. He was living.